cryptocurrency work, I thought it might make sense to begin with a bit of background on how I got to the point of doing work around the idea of a feminist cryptocurrency. So I'm an artist, visual artist, and for about the last 5 years or so, I've been doing a lot of work that looks at the economy, particularly from a feminist economic perspective. So the People's Bank of Govanhill is quite a long-term collaborative project that evolved from a residency that I did with Govanhill Baths in Glasgow in 2014-15. And what really started out as a series of currency experiments and quite ad hoc exchanges, on the street discussions, games exploring feminist economics, has grown into quite a long-term work looking at how we can put feminist economic theory into practice in our local communities. So it's a work that very much looks at the global economy while thinking in practical terms about what we might do at a local level, with Govanhill as a focal point. And I think it's really important to say, people might already be aware of this, but just in case not, feminist economics isn't about a women's economy. It's about valuing all the forms of labour and ways of being that have been deliberately devalued under capitalism. So it's very much recognising that the capitalist economic model is a fairly brutal and neo-colonialist and misogynist force that is the root cause of inequality and climate breakdown. So since 2017, the People's Bank of Govanhill has been a collectively run project with a written constitution, and our feminism is explicitly transgender and non-binary inclusive. So one of the things that I've used quite a lot in this work is this feminist metaphor of the economy as an iceberg. So this is me dressed as the iceberg in Tina's chip shop in Glasgow. So for anyone that's not familiar with this metaphor, basically the idea of the iceberg is that everything that sits above the waterline is the stuff that we're kind of used to thinking about when somebody mentions the economy. So things like paid work, mortgages, credit cards, debt, all of that sort of stuff. But under the waterline are things like domestic labour, subsistence work, the sharing and caring that are very much devalued by our dominant economic system, but the things that we know hold our societies together and keep us afloat. So a lot of this work has really been about finding quite accessible and playful, or maybe even quite silly ways to talk about what is a pretty serious idea, this idea of feminist economics. So I did this performance in a chip shop, in a kebab house, on the street, just trying to invite people to kind of add to and interact with this, I guess, in a kind of shoddy kind of anti-Mr. Wimpy, but just trying to get that conversation out in a way that was felt like people could just talk about this stuff and be quite playful with it. So alongside that, I have for quite a while now been doing this mapping work where I've been mapping local exchange networks. So started this not long after I finished the residency at Govanhill Baths, kind of inviting people to map local exchange networks in Govanhill to find out what already exists, what sort of exchanges already take place, and also where the gaps are, maybe where we could connect a bit more. So this set of visual codes and symbols that was eventually developed into a set of printing blocks were developed with women's groups to create maps of intersecting economies below the waterline. And as it developed into a Map Your Own Economy toolkit, which is basically a set of stamps that can be used by groups or individuals or organisations to map both our monetary and non-monetary economy or support network. And it's also very useful in showing where power lies. So People's Bank of Govanhill opened this exchange space, the swap market, in September 2018, really as a result of all this research that we've been doing into community exchange, in response to people saying that we really needed a base, a place to come together and to focus some of these discussions and to facilitate community exchange. The swap market works as a skills and a knowledge exchange, a workshop space, as well as facilitating the exchange of goods, traditions and cultures, a place for shared learning, a space to work together to look at how feminist economics can be put into practice. And we've held regular talks, film screenings, events and skill swaps. Since opening just over 18 months ago, the swap market has got around 2,000 members who are mostly local residents who regularly use the space. So while that's amazing and like really great in many ways, it's not been without its challenges. The project has taken off much more rapidly than any of us anticipated. So we'd kind of come to a point earlier this year of really trying to slow things down a bit and think quite carefully about the idea of growth and what sort of growth we might want, given that we're proposing an alternative to the model of exponential growth in GDP. How do we want to grow as a feminist organisation? And reflecting a lot just now on how the global pandemic we're in the midst of might shape and change the way we work, and also how we want to work with technology. So I think like we've seen a really like kind of new language almost coming out recently around solidarity economies, people talking a lot more about mutual aid and also online collaboration since the COVID crisis began. And then alongside that, an increased interest in how we can use available technology to connect and support each other through these really difficult times. So I really feel like this quite like a really radical rethinking of economic models now seems inevitable in what is pretty certainly the beginning of a further economic crisis and further climate breakdown. So while it's a really difficult time, I'm really interested in the sort of a lot of thinking that's coming out at the minute and talking about the fact that times of crisis can open up space for new possibilities, a time to imagine radical alternatives and find better ways of coexisting. What Arundhati Roy really eloquently describes in her article, "The Pandemic as a Portal to a New World." Kind of in 2019, I began thinking about this idea of feminist cryptocurrency. Really kind of asking this question, if we're inevitably moving towards a cashless society where machines and technology have an ever increasing impact on our lives, we want to know how we can do this in a way that empowers people, enables us to share resources across networks, and meets our needs rather than allowing technology to further disempower people and exacerbate inequality. Quite interested in questions around how we can use technology ethically to act in solidarity and create maybe trans-local support networks, but remembering that often the most marginalised people have little or no access to the internet. And it's worth mentioning here that more than half the members of the swap market don't have regular internet access, and it's something that we've been thinking and talking about a lot in recent weeks. So crypto knitting circles, which is the thing that I'm supposed to be talking about, is a research collaboration between myself as an artist and designer Bettina Nissen that centred around the swap market exchange hub in 2019. So inspired by a shared interest in feminist economics and the potential for emerging technologies to disrupt established power structures and create new networks. But we took a fairly critical look at the potential applications for tech such as blockchain and cryptocurrency. We started out with a series of game-based workshops at Swap Market, just really exploring possible uses of new technology in community currency. Thinking about how we might ensure that the bias and prejudice that we face today are not coded into the tech of the future. And thinking really carefully about what tech we might find useful, but also like when we don't really want to introduce the technology, maybe we're managing perfectly well without it. While we're really interested in the potential of tech like blockchain, there's also a concern that introducing such technologies into functioning alternative economies might just be a way of controlling and monitoring something that works perfectly well outside of the mainstream economy. So that year-long research process really allowed us to define what technologies might be most useful in community context, how we might want to create a distributed network, what would be exchanged and who would find this most useful, and taking a really broad interpretation of the term cryptocurrency, thinking of this really simply as a decentralized network of transactions incorporating an agreed set of values or ethics. And towards the end of last year, I worked with a really brilliant creative technologist called Libby O'Dye, who kind of worked with Bettina and myself to create this variable rate of exchange in the swap market, trying to test out like a kind of experiment in collectively coding value into currency, looking at what would happen if everyone who visited the swap market could alter or control the rate of exchange. So I guess that research in some ways has raised as many questions as it's kind of answered. It's answered some of the questions we set out with and raised more. Questions like whether we would want a hack-proof system, or would we rather have a framework that allows people to adapt and change in a more open source way? And who has the power to change the system? Does that always lie with the programmer? Conversations about care really dominated all of the workshops. And the thing that we keep coming back to through all of this work is the need to collectively share our knowledge and find ways of better caring for each other. So I guess the kind of question that we finished with was could we co-design a system for shared experiential learning based on a principle of mutual care? So following on now this year from the sort of crypto knitting circles is a new project proposal that we've put together called String Figures, which we hope to begin later this year. So String Figures takes its title from techno-feminist Donna Haraway's metaphor for the threads that connect us, a method of tracing, following the threads that connect us through acts of kindness, care and solidarity. So essentially, String Figures' idea is it's kind of quite simple. It's really to hack online drawing tools to build and map a translocal exchange network centred on mutual care and support, and to adapt digitally the visual mapping toolkit that I created through the People's Bank of Govan Hill work into an online method to visualise this network and trace the process of exchange and mutual support to kind of create what would eventually be a distributed ledger. So as a pilot project, we plan to bring together 8 groups to form a network. So that'll be activists, artists working in social contexts and grassroots organisations. Really brilliant, but also quite precarious projects that work on the front line, work that is vitally important, but that can be really emotionally draining and physically exhausting. So String Figures will hopefully allow us to develop a support network where we find new ways to care for and support each other in our work as we work together towards a sustainable and equitable future, to try and find a collective voice and to take time to share our experiential knowledge and to work out how we can support each other through difficult times. So it'll be like a kind of translocal network, really, with the bulk of the networks being kind of in and around kind of Govan Hill, South Glasgow area, but also a few groups from other parts of Europe who are doing particularly interesting work on kind of equality and technology. So we began writing the String Figures proposal at the end of 2019, but it's really interesting that we're now seeing all these new conversations about care right now, alongside I guess really public displays of an appreciation of certain types of care work, although that work is still largely pretty badly paid. And then also asking, what about the less visible kind of unpaid care work that's being done in domestic settings all the time? So I think I kind of thought I would finish up by trying to pull this back to the feminist perspective on economics. We live under an economic doctrine that was built on the model of a rational, autonomous man, the concept of a man who is assumed to be free from caring responsibilities, probably white, probably cisgendered, and who acts entirely out of self-interest, someone who doesn't care. So not only does that create some pretty bizarre gender norms, it prioritises self-centeredness. And it assumes that caregivers, often but not always women, are inherently caring, rather than care being something that is difficult, a set of skills that have to be learned and constantly improved and worked at. So, I guess we can take the following discussion in whatever direction we want, but I thought I would propose some points for discussion and people can pick up on these if they want to, or there might be other questions that people want to ask, but here are the kind of questions that I had. How do we make sure that these conversations about care and mutual support that are quite prominent right now don't go away? How do we make sure that we don't return to business as usual after social distancing is over? So the kind of the good stuff, the stuff that we'd like to see come back, comes back, but also that we really use this point as a way to instigate a shift. And how do we ensure that the technology that we're using to connect in this moment is actually emancipatory and isn't exacerbating inequality or heading us straight towards a world of surveillance and mass control? So I guess it's about making sure that we seize this opportunity to think radically about the kind of future that we want, to build new coalitions and to invent a radical new economy that puts care at its core.